When you retire, you may get a chance to go to football heaven. This is football heaven.
We are truly blessed for each week to talk to a Pro Football Hall of Famer. We hope you like last week's bi-week show where we hosted the CEO and president of Hager Clothing Company, Mr. Michael Stent, as he talked about one of the iconic figures of being a Pro Football Hall of Famer. That's right, he gave us the whole process about the gold jacket. So if you didn't get a chance to check out that show, make sure you click back because it's very informative. Okay, well, before we look ahead to some of the storylines of Week 8 and look ahead to Week 9, our guest, yes, he is the first NFL player to score a touchdown in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. Many of his 76 touchdown receptions came from him just flat out outrunning his opposition. During his 9 seasons with the Green Bay Packers, he was selected to 7 Pro Bowls, and he's one of the 49 Hall of Famer selectors. He's also an analyst for CBS Sports from the class of 2003. Please welcome Mr. James Lofton to the mission. James, welcome to the mission, sir.
Well, the class of 2003 makes me sound halfway young, but when you go back to a guy who was drafted in 1978, boy, that guy must really be old.
You are a CBS Sports analyst, broadcast where you and Mr. Catalan break down and call the games each and every week. And before we dive in and talk about some of the primetime matchups, I really want to just take a minute to talk about your look backs of Week 8 and as you look ahead to Week 9. What are some of the things that caught your attention from last week, James?
What's funny, right over your right shoulder, you had Roger Goodell holding up Jared Goff, who was the #1 pick by the Rams in the NFL draft, who's now playing, obviously, for a different team, the Detroit Lions, because of a big trade with he and Matthew Stafford. And that's the game we had last week. And that was for a lot of football fans who can't get enough football. They watch the show Hard Knocks. So you got a great look at Dan Campbell and his view of his team, his enthusiasm, and talking about grit and determination in football. So we were there. We were there at practice. We got to meet with Dan Campbell. We got to meet with Jared Goff. And so a lot of those things, you know, you get to see firsthand. And I think that's the most special thing about being a broadcaster. Each week you dive into 2 teams and you dive knee deep into them and you learn everything about them that you can. And you get to see their players up close as opposed to just flipping the channels and going, oh, that guy had 100 yards rushing or that guy had a half a sack or whatever. So you get to see these guys as real people.
Who do you have this week?
Sometimes my mind goes blank as soon as somebody asks me that, but this week I have the Las Vegas Raiders visiting the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the Raiders just played in New Orleans last week, lost 24-0. Jacksonville was all the way over in London. They lost in the last second to the Denver Broncos. So 2 teams who are both coming off disappointing games, to say the least, are going to square up against each other.
You know, we have a segment here called our Hall of Fame NFL Player Watch List, and this really gives our listeners and viewers a chance to find out who our Hall of Famers are watching during this year's season. And with that being said, and I know you cover the games week in and week out, but who are some of the guys that you came into the 2022 season really wanting to see grow and develop and take that next leap in their career?
You know, that could be 2 or 3 guys on each and every team. And it really is, because what you're looking for that growth, and you're looking for guys who are game changers, guys who can kind of dominate the game. I got to coach in the league for a little while when I was with the San Diego Chargers and a year with the Raiders. And I remember with the Chargers, one of the things that we did as a staff, each coach would look at the whole team's roster at the end of the year, 60 players, and you would grade them. And you had a grade. We can win with this guy. He can win for us, which is a higher grade, or we need better at that position. And it was a real simple thing. So the running back coach would turn that in, the defensive back coach would turn that in, I would turn it in. And I think it's a real easy way to look at a team's roster. So when I'm looking at a team's roster, I look at it and I go, okay, this guy can win the game for us. And you have maybe 3 or 4 of those guys, you get 7, 8, or 9 of those guys, and all of a sudden you are a 12, 13 season win type of team. If you have a bunch of guys where you need better, then you're in a little more struggle mode and you're probably trying to rebuild. So I think that's one of those things that I look at that maybe a lot of fans just don't look at.
I want to ask you about 3 quarterbacks and their growth and development and how they've been progressing this season. Number 1, Tua Tagovailoa. Number 2, Patrick Mahomes. And number 3, Josh Allen. What do you like about these young men?
Well, the last 2 are guys who can win any game for you.
Mm-hmm.
We had Tua this past week as the Miami Dolphins were playing the Detroit Lions. And one of the things that we have a segment called Lofty Goals. Yeah. And so offensively, for the Dolphins, I put down Tua, 75% completions would be a real lofty goal in this game. Well, he was over 80%.
Wow.
Because he's extremely accurate. He has great receivers in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle who can get open and they create separation. And so even though they're not big receivers, they're going to be 2 or 3 yards away from the guy who's trying to cover them because they're so fast. And Tua is so accurate. He throws such a catchable ball that I thought, 75%, that's a pretty lofty goal because twice in the season he had been around 72%, and another time he was around 69%. So I thought 75, can he reach that? He was over 80% completion for the game. And so he really accelerated his growth in that game. And in games that he's played, they're 5-0.
And have you seen a change in him since he's come back from that horrific incident that happened, injury that happened with him?
Well, we talked to him about it. And the one thing that he said, I'm so passionate about this game. And I love this game. He had family members who are going, we don't know if you should continue to play.
Wow.
But he doesn't want to give it up. I kind of liken it a little bit to when Andrew Luck walked away. Now, Andrew Luck had been 7 years in. He had a bad shoulder injury that just wouldn't heal. He had other bumps and bruises and different things like that. But Tua hadn't gotten to that stage yet. Yes, he's had injuries in college, and he had a couple of injuries early on in the pros. This was the first one that I think everybody looked at. Mm-hmm. And because it was a head trauma, and the first one, we felt like, and I say we, the general public felt like, was a misdiagnosis. How could you let him continue to play when he's stumbling around and then he gets hurt the subsequent week? So everybody's concerned with that. But Tua said, I want to be cautious, but you can't be too cautious when you're on the field. And I'm competitive, but I also realize I want to be able to stay on the field to help my team.
You've played, you've coached some of the best that's in the game. But when you mentioned Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, do they have that it factor, James? Do they have that factor that maybe one day that they will be in the room that's next door to me, that bus gallery?
I mean, they're headed in that right direction. And for players who are so young, I hesitate to talk about the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Copy that.
Because one of my things when you look at it is I look at length of career. Did a guy get to play 10 or 12 years? And then you check that box off. Then the next one I look at, when he played, was there a 5-year span where you considered him one of the 2, 3, 4 best at his position in the league? Got to be able to check that box off. And then the next one is, did he give his team a chance to play for championships? You don't have to rack up a Super Bowl win every year, because you look at what Tom Brady's done to the league. He's taken that opportunity away from a lot of players because he's won so many Super Bowls. But did you give your team a chance to play for those championships? And right now you look at Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, and they're checking that box off for their 2 respective teams.
Got you. Well, let's dive into it. Thursday night matchup, and let's talk about some of the primetime matchups in Week 9. Thursday night brings us to the Eagles versus the Houston Texans. The Eagles are undefeated right now. Your thoughts on that game, James?
Well, the Houston Texans are coming off a game where they faced Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. Derrick Henry for the 4th time, and we're talking about potential Hall of Famers, but for the 4th time at 200 yards against the Houston Texans. Now, if you're a Houston Texans defensive player, all week long you've been told, we got to try and stop Derrick Henry. And you're listening to the coaches say that, and you say, well, how are we going to get 13 guys on the field at one time to stop Derrick Henry? So, they just had the battering ram lowered at them. And now they have to turn around and play on Thursday night. Tough assignment for the Houston Texans. And, they're just trying to get that next win. And when you're at that stage, it's so tough. And obviously the Eagles are trying to continue on that roll. And they're trying to get to the point where we're just playing this one game at a time. And then the 72 Dolphins are down there chilling the champagne, waiting for the Eagles to lose one ball game.
Tennessee Titans and Derrick Henry, he travels to Kansas City to face the Chiefs, which looks like it's going to be a really tough matchup Sunday night.
It was interesting. As a guy who votes on the Pro Football Hall of Fame and also vote for the All-Pro teams and different things like that, at the midseason, they all want to know who your midseason MVP is. Mm-hmm. Last year, after 8 games, Derrick Henry, he got hurt. So we send in our ballots, and I send in Derrick Henry. They said, well, he's not playing. I said, that doesn't mean he's not the most valuable player. And to me, when I look at this league, you have quarterbacks who are great, receivers who are great, and one running back who really stands head and shoulders above every other running back. Yeah, there are guys who might match his numbers, but there's nobody that I think who has his physical dominance. He's 6'3", 247 pounds, runs sub 4.5, and he'd probably tell you he might even run sub 4.4, but he just keeps coming at you. And I said it's like when you're a little kid and you get to go to the beach for the first time, and you're standing out there in that knee-deep water with your dad, and the waves are coming at you. And he says, you better watch out because count the waves, and this like 5th wave is going to be really big. And that's Derrick Henry coming at you, where it just overpowers you, and he just keeps going and going and going. And I don't think there's anybody else like him in the league.
Well, Kansas City's coming off that bye, so hopefully they had some extra days to prepare for him. Monday night, the Ravens fly down to the Bayou to face the Saints. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
Well, the Saints just shut out the Raiders, and so they're feeling good about themselves. Mm-hmm. And, when I look at that, I just see 2 unique teams who find ways offensively to do things a little differently than a lot of other teams. And I think it's going to be a fun matchup. And I'd love to go down there and eat some food before the game because I think it's one of my favorite places just to travel to.
Their signal caller, Lamar Jackson, he I didn't mention him in that group of the 3 quarterbacks, but you could easily put him in that argument as well. What are your thoughts on the way he's developed? Because, he had the knock on him. Is he a running back? Is he a quarterback? Can he stand in? And it seems like anytime the pundits put something on him, he rises to the occasion.
Well, the thing I noticed about him, and I've done maybe about 4 or 5 Raven games with him as a quarterback, is as I analyze what quarterbacks do, the traditional quarterback takes the snap from the center, and now he's in the gun, as opposed to a couple years ago when he was under the center. He'd take a 5-step drop, then read the coverage, look at the safeties, see what they were doing, see if the linebackers are dropping. And so he'd have that cushion of area to look and to see what the coverage is going to be. Lamar Jackson takes the snap, he goes down the line. He's at the end of the line. He's 2 yards away from the defensive end. There's a linebacker closing in on him. There's a corner on the outside. He has to diagnose more information than the guy who just dropped back in the pocket, and he has to do it faster. So to me, if you're talking about quarterbacks and their IQ levels for football, Lamar Jackson's far exceeds the guy who's just dropping back in the pocket and taking a look at the coverage down the field, because he's right there at the line of scrimmage and diagnosing it. And you start to look at his completion percentage. He's 64, 65%, just like the other guys are. Do they have the legs and the ability to run through traffic like he does? Josh Allen does. So, and you talked about Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes can use his legs just as well as the other 2 guys that we just talked about. So that should be a class of 3 when you talk about who the unique and interesting quarterbacks are, because dropping back in the pocket and being a pocket passer, you don't get that luxury very often in the National Football League.
Well, there it is. A look at James Lofton's Hall of Famer NFL player watch list, along with his primetime matchup analyst. And that is brought to you by the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Book your trip today to Canton, Ohio. Please visit profootballhof.com for all of your Pro Football Hall of Fame information. Well, before we put you on the hot seat, James, as you know, you're one of the 49 selectors, and for this year's 2023 Pro Football Hall of Fame class, the seniors and the coach finalists have been announced. Ken Riley, Joe Klecko, Chuck Howley, and Don Coryell. When you think of these men, what are some of the fond memories that you remember of playing with these guys, playing against these guys, or just hearing some of your colleagues throughout the league talk about these men?
It's funny. Chuck Howley is the one guy that I didn't play against or what didn't influence my career. But when I retired, my wife and I and our family, we moved to Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw his name a lot because he had a uniform company that did uniforms for businesses. And you see these Chuck Howley trucks all around town. So I'm looking at that. And the thing that I know about him is he's a first round pick when he came into the league. But when he came into the league, and I think, was it with Cleveland or that might be with Cleveland? Because go ahead.
No. I'm listening to you. Yeah. I know he finished his career with Dallas, but I'm not for sure who. Yeah.
And he had a devastating knee injury early in his career, and he thought his career might have been done, and obviously it wasn't. And he goes to Dallas, and you look at his ability to play big in the big games in the Super Bowls. He did that. He was Super Bowl MVP in the game that the Cowboys actually lost. He's only MVP in a losing effort. So I think as writers are looking at the game, and when that game was played, football was a lot more simpler because you could look and say, well, who had a lot of tackles? Who was knocking guys down all the time? And it was Chuck Howley. But I think what happened is as you had the merger, the AFL-NFL merger, and you look at how many guys were going in, and as opposed to 5 guys going in, sometimes there'd be 3, sometimes there'd be 4. And there was this battle between AFL writers and NFL writers. When are you going to put our guy in? If you're not going to vote for our guy, we're not going to vote for your guy. So a guy like Chuck Howley, who you look at what he did and go, he should have been in a long time ago. He didn't get a chance to go in. And so I think that's interesting because I think, there were some people who thought, well, we got enough Cowboys in already. And, here's one of the early Cowboys who didn't get in. And it's great that he's up for it right now.
Defensive back Ken Riley, Anthony Munoz spoke highly of him, a former Cincinnati Bengals. He said he was the guy that you followed in the locker room as a young guy coming into the league. Did you ever get a chance to battle against him or watch his game from afar?
Well, 2 things. He was a coach with the Green Bay Packers when I was a player there.
Oh, wow.
But I also played against him. And I played against him when I was on my hottest streak ever. We had played 8 games. I had over 800 yards receiving for the season. So I'm starting to do the math. I'm going to have 1,600 yards. And I'm wondering, is this an NFL record? Because things are going well. We go down to play the Cincinnati Bengals, and little number 13 lines up against me. And now he did have safety help. But my stat line at the end of the game, going in, like I said, I had 800 yards in 8 games. I had 0 catches for 0 yards, 2 offensive pass interference calls. Me pushing off on Ken. I did catch the balls, but he was on me like glue. And what people don't realize about Ken Riley, his last year in the league, his very last year when he was old and couldn't play, he led the NFL in interceptions. So here's a guy who I firmly believe got overlooked, and maybe because the Bengals didn't have Super Bowl success or postseason success, who really should have been in a long time ago because he's in the top 10 all time in interceptions. So Ken Riley, definitely.
That's amazing. Now, Joe Klecko is near and dear to my heart because I'm a huge New York Jets fan. Defensive tackle, nose guard, played all up and down that defensive line, and he was a member of the New York Sack Exchange. What are some of your fond memories of battling against that group of guys?
Yeah, they had a terrific pass rush, and they had a pass rush when you could give the quarterback the business. So you could harass him. It was interesting. And in that time period, Al Davis had a thing that he would say about the opposing quarterback. And the Jets took this to heart. he's going down, and he's going down hard, and he's going down early. And so you were physical, and that was the way that the game was played at the time. So, now, you can't land on top of them. And these guys, it was a 3-step rule. And by that, I mean, if they took 3 steps and the quarterback had just thrown the ball, they were still going to hit him. So it was a physical time. And Joe Klecko, Mark Gastineau, Marty Lyons, those guys were something else.
And lastly, legendary head coach Don Coryell. What are some of your fond memories of hearing about him and his style of coaching?
Well, I got to play under him in one game. I played in the Senior Bowl, and he was our coach.
Wow.
And I just remember the way that some of the routes that I was taught that week, I took and used those ways of running those routes to Green Bay. I was the most valuable player in that Senior Bowl with him as the coach. And when I look at the progression of the league and a lot of things that he brought from San Diego State into the NFL at St. Louis and then at San Diego Chargers, those concepts are still being run today, and the way that people practice and the way that they go about their business. So Don Coryell, I know it makes Dan Fouts real happy to see him on that list.
That's amazing. That's amazing, James. All right, man. Well, before we let you go, we got to put you on the hot seat. These are fun questions because we want our viewers to get to know you. It's one-word answer. Brought to you by the Hall of Fame merchandise store. Shop for all 32 teams and the Hall of Fame swag at ProFootballHof.com. Use the code MISSION, MISSION, and receive 25% off. All right, James, today's game, which quarterback would you want to line up for?
Ooh. Well, in today's game, if we could both be young again, I'd go with Lynn Dickey, my quarterback from the Green Bay Packers.
Okay.
Got to go with my guy.
Which climate did you prefer to play in?
Marv Levy used to say, when it's too cold for them, it's just right for us.
Toughest road game environment?
It used to be going to the black hole. And I say that because when I got a chance to coach for the San Diego Chargers, going up there to play in the black hole in Oakland was pretty special. But almost anywhere that you go to play on the road, the fans are so much in favor of their team that every road game is a tough game.
Okay, we got some fun with this one. Scrabble or Monopoly?
Monopoly, because I don't spell well.
But okay, Monopoly, but which figure did you use? Were you the hat, the shoe, or the boot?
I would be the hat. You got it with your head.
Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune?
Jeopardy. Oh yeah, Jeopardy. And Aaron Rodgers did a great job as a host.
And lastly, I asked everybody this: if you could be a superhero, who would you be and why?
I probably would be Superman, but not today's Superman, because there are no longer phone booths available. When he used to go into the phone booth and change, number one, you're going, that's not a big area to change in. And does he always have the costume on under his clothes?
But there it is, James Lofton's hot seat. That was great because it seems like every Hall of Famer we talk to, they want to be Superman. James, thank you so much for taking time to join us right here on The Mission. Good luck this week breaking stuff down, and we're going to tune in and listen to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.